job. Okay, class now? All right. So, I think we're ready to go. Jai Ho Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari. Jai Ho Radha Madhava Kunda Bihari. Vijana Balaba Giri Badadhavure Vijana Balaba Giri Badadhavure Vishnupad Paramahansa also Tata Satashi Shiva, His Divine Grace Savaya Charanara Bhaktivedanta Goswami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. ISKCON founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Anandakoti Vaishnav Vrinda ki jai, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai, Prem se kaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadwaita Gadadha Shivasati Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Shri Shri Radhakrishna Gopa Gopinath Shyam Kund Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki jai, Vrindavanam ki jai, Machuranam ki jai, Jagannath Swami ki jai, Vadamai ki jai, Shrimati Lasadeva ki jai, Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai, Gaur Premananda Hari Hari Bol. All glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is the assembled devotees, all glory is to Shri Guru and Gauranga Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Namam Vishnupadaya Krishna Prastaya Budale Shrimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharni Nivashesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deja Tarni. So Om Gana Timidanda Shah Gadanjana Shlakaya Chakshura Meditam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. So I just want to mention before we go on to Bhagavatam, today is the commemoration of the disappearance day of two great personalities, Bhugarbha Goswami and Kashishvara Pandit. And so just a few seconds about Bhugarbha and Kashishvara Pandit. Bhugarbha Goswami was the associate of Lokanath Maharaj, not the Lokanath Maharaj in our movement, of course, but Lokanath Maharaj, who was sent to Braj by Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu before the other Goswamis were sent to Braj. And he and Bhugarbha Goswami laid the groundwork for the other Goswamis to establish the holy places in Braj. So the very, very important personality. And he's considered to be in Krishna Leela, a Manjari Gopi named Prema Manjari. So that's Bhugarbha Goswami. As far as Kashishvara Pandit, he's also considered to be one of the Sakis. Actually, there's two different versions. Some consider him to be Bringuru, who is one of Krishna's coward friends, assistants, and the other version is they consider him to be one of the Sakis. Anyway, but the primary point about Kashishvara Pandit, he was the godbrother of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, initiated by Ishwara Puri. And he and Govinda were ordered by their spiritual master Ishwara Puri to become the servants of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Now, generally, the godbrother should not become a servant of his other godbrothers. I mean, just not the right etiquette. But in the case of the order of the spiritual master, and this is brought out in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, that supersedes ordinary etiquette. So Ishwara Puri ordered Kashishvara and Govinda to become the servants of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Kashishvara Pandit was known to be very strong, in other words, big muscles. So he generally protected Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu whenever there was a kirtan going on. He would help form a circle around Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and protect Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Kashishvara Pandit was also present during the early pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip, and he was one of the early associates, and he always remained with Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Jagannath Puri afterwards. So these two great personalities disappeared on this particular day, which is the next to the last day of the month of Kartik. So very, very important day. And of course, tomorrow is the last day of the month of Kartik, and there's Krishna Rasa Yatra on that particular day, and Nimbarka Acharya's appearance day tomorrow. So it's also a very, very important day, the last day of the month of Kartik. So we'll go on to the Srimad Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 6th chapter, text 55. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Ta Svapatyur Maharaja Nirikshadyatmikaim Kim Getim Anvius Tat Prabhavena Agnim Shantam Ivarjashaha. Of course, not many of you have the verse, so maybe I'll just do it myself a few times. Tasvapatyur Maharaja Nirikshadyatmikim Migatim Anviyus Tat Prabhavena Agnim Sharitam Avarchishaha. Tapsvapatyur Maharaja Nirikshadyat Mikim Gatim Anviyustat Prabhavena Agnim Shantam Ivarchishaha. Tasvapatyur Maharaja Nirikshayat Mikim Gatim Anviyustat Prabhavena Agnim Shantam Ivarchishaha. So you repeat. Taha. All the wives of Saubari. Swapatyuhu. With her own husband. Maharaja. O King Parikshit. Niriksha. Observing. Adyatmikim. Spiritual. Gatim. Progress. Anviyuhu. Followed. Tat Prabhavena. By the influence of their husband. Although they were unfit, by the influence of their husband, they also could go to the spiritual world. Agnim, the fire. Shantam, completely merged. Iva, like. Archishaha, the flames. Translation: O Maharaja Parikshit, by observing their husband progressing in spiritual existence, Shobhari Muni's wives were also able to enter the spiritual world by his spiritual power, just as the flames of a fire cease when the fire is extinguished. So purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, 9th chapter, text 32, Striyo Vaishas Tata Shudaras Tepi Yanti Param Gatim. Women are not considered very powerful in following spiritual principles, but if a woman is fortunate enough to get a suitable husband who is spiritually advanced, and if she always engages in his service, she also gets the same benefit as her husband. Here it is clearly said that the wives of Shobhari Muni also entered the spiritual world by the influence of their husband. They were unfit, but because they were faithful followers of their husband, they also entered the spiritual world with him. Thus a woman should be a faithful servant of her husband, and if the husband is spiritually advanced, the woman will automatically get the opportunity to enter the spiritual world. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 9th canto, 6th chapter of Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled The Downfall of Shobhari Muni. Okay, again. Ta swapatyur maharaja nirikshadyat mikim gatim anviyustat prabhavena agnim shantam ivarchashaha. So Om Gana Timiranda Shagaranjana Shalakaya Chakshur Meditam Yeta Tasmai Shigurave Namaha. So this story of Shobhari Muni is quite interesting because he did have 50 wives. That's really interesting. 50. And really quite a polygamous situation. Of course, not equal to Krishna, who had 16,108. And the way he got those 50 wives was quite interesting, and I think you've heard the story before, that he had actually committed an offense against Garuda, in that he cursed Garuda, that Garuda couldn't go to the Jamuna River to catch fish anymore. And because Garuda couldn't go to the Jamuna River to catch fish anymore, the Kaliya serpent was able to actually take refuge in the Jamuna River. And of course, that whole story is told in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So, but he committed the offense against Garuda, a great devotee of the Lord, and because of that offense against the great devotee of the Lord, he developed material desires. And that's actually the result of committing an offense. That your bhakti becomes second class, third class, or 10th class, depending upon the severity of the offense. And that was a pretty severe offense, cursing Garuda. And I can't. You know, the only more serious offense would be actually punching a devotee. You know, there's verbal offenses which he committed. I mean, which is more than a curse is more than a verbal offense, actually. And even more is the corporal offense. Like you have Brigamuni kicking Lord Vishnu in the chest. That's a corporal offense. Or Brigamuni blaspheming Lord Shiva. That's a verbal offense. And Brigamuni, by neglect, not offering respects to Lord Brahma, that's like in the mind, an offense in the mind. So it's actually quite a serious offense. And so we should understand, according to Srila Rupa Goswami, that when one commits these offenses, one loses the taste for hearing and chanting. And not only that, because you lose a taste for hearing and chanting, you gain a taste for other things, because the spirit soul cannot be restricted from activities. He has to have a higher taste, as we hear in the Bhagavad Gita, Raso Varjan Raso Pyasha Parakrishna Vartate. Without that higher taste, then you're just pretending. Whoops. The higher taste of the mobile phone. So he's just pretending. So what happened is that Shobri Muni, Prabhupada tells the story two different ways. One is that he saw some fish engaged in conjugal affairs. I don't know what it means to have a fish engaged in conjugal affairs, but the fish was. You know, fishes don't engage in conjugal affairs the same way that human beings do. Actually, it's quite interesting. Sometimes the fish, they fertilize the eggs outside of the other fish, and sometimes the mother fish tries to eat the little baby fish, and the father fish has to protect has to protect the little baby fish from the mother fish who wants to eat her own babies. It's pretty weird. But anyway, so one way that Prabhupada told the story is that he saw the fish doing whatever the fish do, like the birds and the bees and the fish. Another way Prabhupada tells the story is that the fish rubbed against certain parts of his body and agitated him. So in any case, the point of the story is he became disturbed. I mean, how many people become agitated in an improper way by watching fish or having a fish rub against them? You got to be really lusty to get agitated by fish. You know, what do they call it? Fish pornography? You know, I just watching on my computer, oh, fish, oh my God, fish. Anyway, so you got to be really in Maya for fish to disturb you. So the fish disturbed him because he committed an offense. And it's described, he basically jumped out of the water and went to the king, King Mandata, and said to King Mandata, I'd like to marry one of your daughters. And the king, seeing how unattractive this sage looked, because he had just spent a whole bunch of time in the water, he was all wrinkly and covered with, I guess, seaweed and everything like that. And he was quite old, too. So the king said, oh my God, if I say no, he's going to curse me. If I say yes, I mean, the girls would never go for this one. So he just said, just as a trick, he says, all right, if any of the girls want you, they can all have you. And so he goes into the woman's ashram. But at the same time, he changes himself by his mystic power to look just like really handsome, with a nice beard and everything like that. The ladies like the beards. So he changes himself to look really handsome. And he says, all right, any of you who want me can have me. And the ladies start fighting over each other. I mean, that's a man's dream. Like the ladies fighting over each other. And they fight over each other, and he says, all right, girls, you can all have me. By his mystic powers, he's able to marry all 50 of them, which is really cool. Not really cool, but, not so cool. But anyway, so he marries all 50 of them, and he gets really attached. But after some time, the effects of the offense sort of wear out, and he realizes, oh my God, I made a big mistake. And now I'm entangled with 50 wives. And then he engages in austerities, and the wives, following their husband, engage in austerities. So, and then basically, they all go back to Godhead. So there's a happy ending to the story. Not all stories have happy endings, but this particular one has a really happy ending. So what can we learn from this? I mean, of course, obviously from the external thing, there's comments about ladies. But of course, in the same verse in the Bhagavad Gita, where ladies are considered, it's the Bhagavad Gita says that be they of lower birth, etc., 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 Shudras, Vaishyas, friends of the twice-born, Brahmabandhu, they can go back to Godhead. At the same time, that verse actually refers to everybody in Kali Yuga. Unless you happen to be born like Prabhupada was, in a first-class Vaishnava family, or like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur was. I mean, if your father was Bhaktivinoda Thakur or Guru Mohan De, fantastico, then that verse doesn't refer to you. But otherwise, that verse basically refers to all of us, isn't it? I mean, how many? And of course, Janmana Jayate Shudra. There's that particular statement about everybody in Kali Yuga, right? Janmana Jayate Shudra. By birth, everyone's a Shudra. Samskara bhavet dvijam. By samskara, then one can actually become twice born. Dvija. Dvija, of course, means Brahman. It also means bird. Because a bird is twice born. Well, once the egg pops out of the mother, I don't know, pops out, it comes out, and that's first birth, and then the egg hatches, and that's the second birth. So first birth is Shudra birth, and especially in Kali Yuga, Kalo Shudra Sambhava. So therefore, many people use this particular verse, Striyo Vaishyas Tata Shudras Tepi Yanti Paramgati, saying, yeah, we men are more intelligent than women. Well, the point is, we're in Kali Yuga, buddy, and therefore, what are you? What is your birth? Well, Shudra. Or, how many of us were born in a Vaishya family? Yes, my father was a businessman, but that's not to say that it was a Vaishya family. Because what is a Vaishya family? Krishna Gauraksha Vanijam, Vaishya Karma Svabhavajam, right? Vaishya means protecting the cows and karmas. My father ate the cows. That's not a Vaishya family, isn't it? And how many of you ate meat, or especially coming from Bengal, you eat fish, right? It's called Gangapal. Would you like some Gangapal for breakfast this morning? With your rice, right? Not all of you. Some of you, of course, were vegetarian.
Is it common?
What?
Is it common in Bengal?
It's common in Bengal, yes. The fruit of the Ganges. That's what it means. So, and how many of you, even if someone's a Brahmin and they work for the Malekshas, they lose their caste. Just like Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami, because they worked for the Nawab, right? They did not enter the temple of Lord Jagannath because they were considered to have lost not only their caste, but also even their Hindu situation or, Varnashram situation. So, we shouldn't use this particular verse in the Bhagavad Gita 9:32 to try to institute or justify discrimination. Your phone is blinking. It's a strobe light. Gotta run a contact. Gauratai ki jai, Jagannath Baladev, Subhadra Maharani ki jai. So, we shouldn't use this verse or any of these other verses to justify discrimination between the genders. Because, basically that verse indicates all of us are minas. Actually, many of us were born even in a lower situation that's mentioned in this particular verse. So, how can we understand this particular situation? Of course, in this particular context of the story, it was a very high-class culture, different culture. So what do we do, or how do we apply this particular injunction? I would apply this injunction in relationship to us and His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. That, and this comparison is also made in the fourth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in the story of Puranjana, where you have the husband is compared to the spiritual master, and the wife is compared to the disciple. And this has nothing to do with gender, external gender. It's not, because nowadays you have to be careful that one may think, even if they're a man, that they're married to the spiritual masters. It's political correctness nowadays. It refers metaphorically to the relationship between the disciple and spiritual master. And in the fourth canto, part 4, when it used to be divided into 4 parts, it mentions that the faithful follower of the spiritual master, when the spiritual master leaves the planet, is dedicated, and even before, is dedicated to the mission of the spiritual master. And then there's the Vani and Vapu concepts, Vapu meaning the body of the spiritual master, and the Vani meaning the instructions or the example of the spiritual master. And then Vani is considered so much more important than Vapu. So in other words, even though we are unfit, let's just put ourselves in the particular context of this purport. Here it is, I'm just going to change a few words here. Here it is clearly stated that the disciples of Srila Prabhupada also will enter the spiritual world by the influence of Srila Prabhupada. Of course, let's refer to myself. I'm not going to call anyone else unfit. Although Bir Krishna Maharaj was unfit, because he was a faithful follower of Srila Prabhupada, he also entered he also has the opportunity to enter the spiritual world with him. Therefore, a disciple should be a faithful servant of his or her spiritual master. And if the spiritual master, of course in the case of Srila Prabhupada, is a pure devotee, the disciple will automatically get the opportunity. And here's the operative word right here. Opportunity to enter the spiritual world. So it's not necessarily true that if your spiritual master is a pure devotee, you're going to enter the spiritual world. What's true is if your spiritual master is a pure devotee, you will get the opportunity to enter the spiritual world. And what does that opportunity mean? That one has to faithfully be a servant, going back to the last sentence here. Therefore, a disciple should be, and I'm actually substituting some words here. But this is a bona fide way to understand this, because we are just as unqualified, actually much more unqualified than the wives of Shobhari Muni. Much more. I mean, I consider myself much more unqualified than the wives of Shobhari Muni. And if you consider yourself more qualified than them, or a qualified devotee, you're fallen because you're not humble. I'm a Brahmin, born in a Brahmin family. I'm a sannyasi, I'm a guru, upadi, all these different designations. So a devotee, Chanadapi, Sunichena, Torori, Vasihishana, Manina, Manadena, Kirtaniya, Sadahari. That's the point. So, anyway, so the question is being a faithful servant of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada, or a servant of His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. And what does that mean, to be a servant of a servant, or a servant of Srila Prabhupada? To carry out Srila Prabhupada's mission. And Prabhupada specifically points that out in the 4th canto, part 4, that if one follows the mission, serves the mission of the spiritual master, after the spiritual master leaves, the super soul becomes present before one. Prabhupada specifically says that. In other words, that's the secret in spiritual life. Not to look for Krishna under some bush in Vrindavan. Prabhupada actually makes this point. I'm referring to 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Sometimes people think the secret of spiritual life is just go to Vrindavan and go to Radhakund, keep taking a bath there. Actually, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, if you go to Radhakund and you're not qualified and you live there, then Radhakund becomes Narakakund for you. You actually go to hell. And Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, of course, he had his place at Radhakund, but he told his disciples never to live at Radhakund, unless they were doing a preaching program. You know, if they had a temple, they were preaching, that's a different thing. But he said we should live, especially when we're in Braj, at Govardhan, and then we keep Radhakund on our head. That's the point. And so we always have these ideas of becoming very advanced in spiritual life and everything like that. And it's, you know, we can only accomplish that. Yasha prasada bhagavad prasada, yasha prasada nagati katopi. We can only accomplish that by the mercy of Krishna's pure devotee. That's the only way I know of, because I'm not qualified to approach Krishna directly. So my concentration is on how to serve Prabhupada. Serving Prabhupada means how to please him. Just like we have in the Nectar of Devotion, the nutshell verse, and Yavi Lashita Shunyam Jnana Karmana Vritam Anukuyena Krishnanashilitam Bhakti Rutamam. The pure devotional service is known by 3 qualities. I'm not talking about the negative qualities now, but the positive qualities are to be active in service to Krishna, to do what Krishna wants, and to do it with a spirit of devotion. You know, sometimes you could do something without a spirit of devotion. That's niyamagraha, which is actually detrimental to devotional service. So in other words, in relationship with the spiritual master, to do what the spiritual master wants, do what Prabhupada wants, to be active, not just simply, you know, I'm planning out one day how to satisfy Prabhupada. And 3, to actually do it willingly, enthusiastically, you know, utsahandasya dharma pravartana, with the desire to please Prabhupada. So those are the 3 requisites. I almost spoke in Spanish, requisitos, because I just came from Mexico. So my mind is still thinking in Spanish. So those are the 3 requisites to actually become Krishna conscious. In other words, faithfulness to Prabhupada, faithfulness, you know, to a servant of Prabhupada, you know, whatever. And then we can go back to Godhead, like the wives of Shobri Muni. So anyway, this is the way I'm taking this particular verse, not in a way to denigrate women, because it's in Kali Yuga. We are all less intelligent and sentimental, controlled by our emotions. I mean, that is my experience. That is my experience. I mean, I just see this amongst male and female persons, and you know, people who have bodies of males and females. I see it among both, like that. So, Krishna, and also, Prabhupada said that one becomes a Vaishnava, then the bodily distinctions are not applicable to the person anymore. Of course, we have to understand practically if one has a female or male body or a child body or whatever. Because if one sees a Vaishnava according to their body, then, or one sees the deity according to whether it's made of stone or wood or something like that, that's hellish intelligence. So, Anyway, that's my point for class. Any questions or comments? Or arguments? Yeah.
It may seem to some that when you're mentioning that, okay, for spiritual masters and creative one, you get the opportunity to also move back to Godhead.
Yeah.
So it seems in our situation, well, argue ISKCON, that if you're a spiritual master, initiating spiritual master, let's say, is somewhere in the Majjhima Adhikari platform.
Right.
You're really saving graces to the exception of Prabhupada as your preeminent Shiksha Guru.
Right.
Otherwise, you're lost.
Yeah. So everybody, that's why everybody in ISKCON needs to accept Srila Prabhupada and also see how our spiritual master connects us. I mean, I'm not saying that none of my god brothers are pure devotees. But the point is we have this guarantee because our spiritual master, if we're not initiated by Prabhupada, connects us with his divine grace, Srila Prabhupada. And one also should use their intelligence too, to see how my spiritual master's instructions are connecting me with Srila Prabhupada. And you can't eliminate that because Prabhupada is the founder Acharya of ISKCON. If you see the spiritual master without the connection to the disciplic succession, without connection to Prabhupada, then you're not really seeing properly your spiritual master. Just like even if you see Prabhupada without connection to Krishna, you're not seeing him properly. That's like Mayavadi philosophy. If you see Prabhupada, and say Prabhupada, and you're not thinking about the Vedic literatures, because there's Guru, Shastra, and Sadhu, then you're not seeing things properly. So we always see our spiritual master in relationship to the previous acharyas, and especially in ISKCON, we take Prabhupada as the primary source of Shiksha. Our shelter was Shiksha. And Shiksha is more important than Diksha anyway. And we see that in our Sampradaya in many cases. Many cases of connection in our Sampradaya, whether it's Baladev Vidyabhushana with Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, whether it's Gaur Kishore Das Babaji Maharaj in relationship to Bhaktivinoda Thakur, whether it's Bhaktivinoda Thakur's relationship to Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj. I mean, there's so many connections that are Siksha connections. The Ritвik people make such a big deal about Diksha, isn't it? But it's not, it's important. It's part of our process, but it's not really as important as Siksha. They just stress Diksha, but that's really turning everything into a ritualistic type of conception. And also you can't take Diksha from someone who's not on the planet, because part of the process of Diksha is the Guru has to say, I accept. It's like getting married to someone without their knowledge, which would be kind of interesting. Who are you? I'm your husband. Who's a famous movies actress? Can you think of a famous movie actress? No. Rani Mukherjee, all right. So, for those of you from India. You walk up to her just one day and say, I got married to you, I had a picture of you, and I'm your husband. Oh my God. That would be pretty hellish, or anyway. Or if you happen to be of a different type of inclination, we'll walk up to, some male star and tell him, I'm your male husband. Anyway, so, or I'm your wife. Anyway, so the point is that there's just an overstress on Diksha, whereas Siksha is actually the most important. And every devotee should be stressed to have their connection with Prabhupada. That's up to the individual person. You can't force it, but you could encourage it. And if we please Prabhupada, we're going back to Godhead. But we also have to take initiation. So it's a good point. So, and of course, if your Diksha Guru is not qualified, that's another question. If he's not even on the Majjhima platform, then one should, do whatever they have to do. But the point is that, Prabhupada is there, and Prabhupada will, if we serve his mission, he will take us back to God. If we leave his mission, then Prabhupada said one is living an illusion or an hallucination. Anyone who leaves the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. That does not mean to criticize someone who is part of any other mission, but if one of Prabhupada's followers leaves ISKCON, then, or disobeys Prabhupada's instructions, then he becomes asara or useless. So that refers to us. Doesn't refer to people in other Gaudiya missions. There's not a criticism of anyone in the Gaudiya mission. Okay, any other questions? Yes, Ananta Gopal.
Sometimes we do some kind of opera or offense.
Yeah.
Unknowingly. So how we can get rid of that unknowingly? We don't know the situation.
Unknowingly, stand on one foot for about 3 days. Don't eat. Be like Hiranyakashipu. Every day we're offering our obeisances to the devotees, Vanchakalpatarubhyascha. Just pray to Krishna and go on chanting. We don't have any specific prayaschitta except for the chanting of the Lord's holy names. Tasmat sankirtanam Vishnu jangamangalamam hasav mahatam api karavya vijakantaka nishkritam. So, just try your best. Because if you commit offense against a great devotee like Garuda, you're going to start to get married to 50 women. You already have to pay for your family now and your children in university, right?
Yeah.
Imagine if you had 50 wives and each one had 2 children and they had to go to all the universities. You'd be in the French Quarter for the rest of your life. So, anyway, so just be careful around Vaishnavas. Just be careful. Vadanvi savadana mate. Just like the caution sign. Vadan, savadana. Be careful. So we should be careful around Vaishnavas. And, sometimes inadvertently we may commit an offense, but we just have to be careful. All right, anything else? Yes?
Two things, like when in the story we can consider 2 things. One is, of course, we know Garuda is a pure devotee of Krishna. He is his eternal servant.
Yeah.
But then we see that his food is fish, which is sort of contradictory. So how do we understand that? And another thing is, so I guess when Shakyamuni was meditating under the water, I guess essentially he was associating with materialistic entities because they were just, doing whatever.
Yeah, well, he was thinking himself the protector of the fish and associating with them.
Yeah, so he was associating with them. So out of compassion for the wrong type of people, I guess,
Yeah.
he committed aparadha against a pure devotee.
Yes.
So because of that, I guess he fell down. I guess also due to the wrong association and influence.
Yeah.
And then he fell down. But we see, even though he fell down, and I guess the fall down, the punishment for the fall down is entering into materialistic life, like
Right.
the association he had.
Right.
But still we see that he is respected, and we still see that he has his mystic powers. He didn't lose his mystic powers.
That's right.
And then by Krishna's mercy, I guess he was again able to realize, maybe because of his past, learning or whatever, he was able to
Right.
get back on the spiritual path, and he was able to go back to God.
Right.
So even though he did commit a grave offense, because the
Yeah.
Lord is not just a normal devotee, he's a pure devotee, how was he able to get rid of the offense, the effects of the offense, and again go back on the path of Krishna consciousness?
Okay,
So,
well,
there's 2 questions.
Well, first of all, Krishna says in the Gita, Swapmabhak yasha dharma shatrayate mahato bhayat. For in this endeavor there is no loss of diminution, and a little advancement protects one from the most dangerous type of fear. So, when you commit an offense, you don't lose your spiritual advancement. It's just put on hold. It's just like sometimes, it's just like here's a mobile phone, for example. Sometimes I just don't know where my mobile phone is. I haven't lost it per se, but, for time being, I forget it, but I still have it. So therefore I have something on my watch, I just press a button and it tells me where my mobile phone is. So, in other words, so you don't lose your spiritual advancement, no matter what, but you may forget it for some time. So it's a question of him remembering his spiritual advancement because it got covered for some time. But spiritual advancement is never lost. Even offenses don't cause you to lose your spiritual advancement. It causes you to forget or be covered up for some time. But you don't lose your spiritual advancement. Does that answer the question?
Yeah,
And so it's associated with the fish. It's interesting. But it's very sentimental. I wanted to talk about that he thought that he was the protector of the fish, which is actually a really interesting point. And it brings to mind some occasion that something happened at the temple, one of our temples recently. We have a cat at the temple, and the cat caught a mouse, little cute little mouse. And one of the devotees was thinking, oh my God, how can this poor cat torture this mouse? And so she took the mouse and saved the mouse and thought, now I am Mouse Ishwara, or whatever it is. I'm the savior of the mouse. But then at the same time, the poor cat was deprived of its dinner. So each and every living entity has a right to a particular type of food, depending on the body. If I was born in a bird body, I would have a right to eat fish. That's Krishna's arranged things in such a way. It's not that, let's say, if a tiger eats an antelope or whatever tigers eat for dinner, that it's wrong, it's sinful. A tiger's body is sinful, but a tiger cannot commit sinful action or be karmic activity. It's working out its previous sinful activity. So there's nothing wrong. And Garuda, of course, he's not a bird because he's sinful. He's a bird because he's an eternal servant of the Lord. And he's allowed that. Not only is he allowed to eat fish, he could almost eat anything except for Brahmins. According to the Mahabharata, he's allowed to eat lower class human beings. Can you imagine? So you better chant, Brahman. Because one day Garuda may eat you if you don't chant your rounds and follow the principles. You see Big Bird. Anyway, this is a joke on TV. The Big Bird got a vaccination. Anyway, so so the point is that he's a lot of those things. In fact, there's those stories in the Mahabharata how he ate a giant tortoise and an elephant one time, and he also ate a whole bunch of maleches. And there happened to be a Brahmin inside the Malecha village, and he got a burning sensation in his throat when he ate the Brahmin by accident, and then he had to spit the Brahmin up, and the Brahmin was allowed to take his wife out of Garuda's throat. This is from the Mahabharata. Interesting story. So he's allowed those things. Krishna allows those things. But for us, patram pushpam phalam toyam yumi bhakta prayashati, leaf fruit, a little water, some milk products, things like that, are allotted for us. Each and every species of life has a different allotment, and that's dharma. Like even in Varnashram dharma, there's different activities. Like, for example, in different ashrams, people are allowed to do different things. A brahmachari has to serve his spiritual master. Oh, of course, we all have to serve a spiritual master. But a brahmachari gurukule vasandanta garodhitam. And a householder has to take care of his wife. But a brahmachari doesn't take care of his wife. I hope not. So anyways, just like that, sometimes you have to find a brahmachari who's working in the French Quarter to take care of his family. But that's not brahmachari life. Is it? A brahmachari means something different. So brahmachari is allowed certain things, vanaprastha is allowed certain things, sannyasi is allowed certain things. So that each and every varna, each and every ashram has different allowances and responsibilities. That's Vaishnava or Vedic consciousness. So in each and every body, there's a different type of food you're allowed. And as you get older, you're allowed to eat less and less.
So, for example, it's the nature of a cat to eat a mouse and birds to eat fish.
Yeah.
As human beings, of course, and further on as devotees, we accept the sadhana, we don't eat meat, we eat
Fish.
whatever.
Yeah.
But because we know the right from wrong, if we see, for example, another entity, for example, like you said, a cat
Yeah.
is taking a mouse. So we know that this is taking the life of another living entity. Do we just do we not do anything because we know this is nature happening?
That's right.
Or do we
That's right.
do as human beings we say, oh, we feel compassionate, but then you're hurting one of them.
Yeah, but you feel compassionate for the mouse because the mouse is cute.
Yeah. Or because we don't want the.
No, because the mouse is cute. That's why you feel, if you see the cat eating the cockroach, you will not save the cockroach. I mean, we discriminate, but we have to understand the discrimination is based on sense gratification. Just like we were talking yesterday, how there's termites in the building, so we have to kill billions of termites.
Yeah.
And each and every one of those termites is a living entity who has the same right that I have, and is just as beloved to Krishna as any of us is. So, the point is, we really have to understand our psychology when we say, first of all, then we're depriving the cat of its authorized food.
So
We're interfering with the karma.
What should we? Yeah. So if we interfere, that means we're interfering with the karma. So we should just let that.
That's right.
happen.
That's right. I mean, of course, I'm not going to go heaving someone out because they saved the poor little mouse. I mean, I got to be a little intelligent, not go yelling at every devotee because they save mice.
Yeah, sometimes Walter, so many cockroaches there. If you not put it,
I haven't seen a devotee save a cockroach yet. Because the cockroach is not cute. The mouse is just like one of these little mice. If it was a big rat, you'd say, eat it.
There are, for example, Jed Bharat when he didn't want to step on the ants.
Yeah, that's him stepping on the ants. He's a human being. He didn't stop a tiger or an elephant from stepping on the ants. He didn't want to step on the ants. That's a natural point because we're human beings, so we want to commit the least possible damage to other living entities. But when one living entity, exists, jivasa jivanam. One living entity exists by eating another living entity. This is life. Otherwise, I would go to the African jungle and protect all the deer from the lions if I thought that this was improper. Right? I'd take my gun and just travel along with the deer pack or whatever antelopes they have there.
So that way it will harm the ecosystem. So.
Yeah, it harms the ecosystem. I mean,
You're killing the lions, so you're killing something.
yeah, I wouldn't kill them. I'd just shoot a dart so they go to sleep and then they wouldn't have anything to eat. There's a whole natural system that Krishna has set up.
Yeah.
So you can't, like even when they kill mosquitoes, sometimes it creates an imbalance in the ecosystem. Everything has a place. But Deleuze, you have a question?
Yes, a little bit comical, I guess. I was just thinking, kind of work mentality, that the Jains must be feeling very happy now because everyone's wearing masks.
Yeah.
So they don't, they cut down on killing
Some bugs.
Some microbes and germs.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the funny thing is that a Jain will wear a mask to avoid, killing germs, but he'll get in his car and start the car, and the intake of the car,
Yeah.
will cremate thousands of times more germs that can possibly be killed by his breathing.
Yeah.
Or he'll go in an airplane, the same thing occurs. I mean, it's just like, you can't stop this world. whatever you do is going to harm other living entities. Just minimize it. But as far as one living entity and another living entity, we can't interfere with what's going on. I mean, yes, so sometimes people do it out of compassion. That's all right. I'm not going to criticize. I am criticizing. I'm not going to heavy someone out about it. It's just it's life. Garuda has a right to eat anything he wants, anything Krishna wants him to eat. That's his right. And if you interfere with his right, then with Garuda it's a mad elephant offense, but with a cat, it's not a mad cat offense. I think we should, and now, what's that?
What is that verse? Jivasa Jivanam, one of the enemies food for another.
Yeah, that's a Jivasa Jivanam. And at Chaturpada, or that living entities with 2 legs are food for, have their food of the living entities with 4 legs, like that. That's a Bhagavatam verse. I forget really where it comes from, but Prabhupada would quote that verse. That's the point of this world. We don't want to deprive a living entity from its food. I mean, like these poor termites, their food is what? Wood.
Yeah.
But they're trying to eat our temple down.
Temple going to fall down.
So they're trying to eat our temple. They're attacking us. So they're an attacker. So we have a right to defend ourselves against attackers. Unless there was a way to get rid of them without hurting them, I don't know. Maybe you just bring some lady termites and they all chase the lady termite. Oh, I can't. Forget it. Okay. So, see every. Okay. All glorious to His divine grace.